You're listening to the UnSafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
The Lord took care because she had all this debt that she had accumulated, offending his own children. As believers, we're not supposed to engage like that. We're not to engage with Babylonian-like activity or actions. We don't need to be building up debts before the Lord or in the minds of the nations around us or our neighbors around us. Why? Well, go back and look at Habakkuk 2:4 again. The just shall live by faith. So back to the victims, or as Yahweh puts it, the creditors.
In this life, many people live in a worldly way. Before we came to Christ, many of us lived the same way, indulging in our own wants and desires. But when we come to Christ and offer Him our hearts, He frees us from those burdens. He removes the shackles from our wrists and sets us free. So why would we ever want to return to those chains? Today, Pastor Ken encourages you to keep your eyes fixed on the Lord. Leave the past in the past and look forward to your relationship with Jesus. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, as he continues his message, Subversive Prophecy.
We'll see the same behavior in corporations too. Have you ever noticed a corporation that once they desire to go multinational, they're not happy unless they go all multinational? They not only want to have just a little piece of whatever country they're in, they want the entire market. The West wants to stop Chinese expansion, for example. But businesses want to have access to the Chinese markets. That makes no sense. And that's not new. That's been going on at least since 500, 600 BC. That's what we're reading here. There's never any satisfaction. They always want more. Serial coveters. Solomon actually warned about this kind of conduct hundreds of years before. And in Ecclesiastes 5, verses 10 to 12, I love this. He actually has several comments throughout Ecclesiastes about different things that people want to do. And this is where he's talking about money. Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness. The more you have, the more people come to help you spend it. So what good's wealth except to perhaps watch it slip through your fingers? People who work hard sleep well, and whether they eat little or much, but the rich seldom get a good night's rest. Well, do you know why? They're worried about somebody coming and taking what they got. So they got to get more. They're worried, like Babylon, that somebody's going to come and take their stuff. So they build big walls. They big, large security systems. They hire slaves. Well, they steal slaves. And they expect those slaves to protect them. So what about the victims of all of this? Well, that's what the Lord's going to talk about next. What about those who are the victims of Babylon or the victims of another nation, firm, or individual who behaves in this kind of behavior? Verse 6, will all of these not take up a song of ridicule against him, even a saying and insinuations against him, and say, woe to him who increases what is not his, for how long, and makes himself rich with debts? Will your creditors not rise up suddenly, and those who collect from you awaken? Indeed, you will become plunder for them. Since you've looted many nations, all the rest of the people will loot you. Because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town, and all its inhabitants. The victims of Babylon, those who have been subjugated by them, like Israel and all the surrounding nations, will ridicule and taunt Babylon when Babylon falls. This is called satire again, okay? A satire is the exposure of a human vice or folly through rebuke or ridicule. It can show up in literally any form or genre within the Bible. It could be the entire book, Amos's satire. Or it can be as small as an individual proverb, and there's some of those too. It is the freedom to exaggerate, overstate, and oversimplify to make a satiric point. And we're going to see that, even more of it. It's subversive. It's a subversive form. It questions the status quo. And that's what Habakkuk is doing here. He's questioning the status quo. And that's what the Lord's telling him. Don't assume, here's the truth. And what he's doing is he's attacking people's thought patterns to make people uncomfortable. And that's what the Lord does. You read the Bible, and if you take what it says seriously, do you finish reading it feeling comfortable? Or do you realize I need to change something? Usually I realize I got to change that too. Okay, great, not a problem. Now, we've already seen a small example of how prophecy can be subversive at the beginning of verse 5. And we saw how it was fulfilled in Daniel 5. And we saw how God kind of made sport of Belshazzar at the end of the day, made him look like a fool, made the ruling group of Babylon look like a bunch of fools. This section is subversive literature, or as David Pryor calls it, prophetical in nature and applicable to all times and all nations. All these woes are directed at those who, in one way or another, reject the principle stated in chapter 2, verse 4, the righteous will live by faith. So this is a little more global than just, what are you going to do about Babylon? This is, what are you going to do about unbelievers, Lord? Well, the Lord's saying, don't worry, just watch. Now, as we read through this section, sometimes we may gloat, we may laugh at some of the images, we may be in horror at some of the stuff that's being talked about, just like we laughed at the king of Babylon turning his white robes brown. God's heart is always this. He wants to see people repent, even the Babylonians. So how does this ridicule begin among those who have been victimized? Simple. They remember who did this to them and how it was done. And God calls it a debt. These are the debts. They're remembering what happened to them. Now, I've seen this in the business world. People think they can get ahead faster by walking on the backs of others on their way to the top. I've seen that happen more than once. They lie about people. They steal credit for projects from other people who actually did it. They steal ideas. They do rumor mongering, and that's not a complete list. There's a lot more. Having worked in business for 30 years, I can give you a list of that I've seen. I've literally seen unbelievers, when they see somebody fall, as the person's walking out the door and they've lost their job, applaud. I mean, and that's, you don't want to see that, but I've seen it. Because the person who did those things has been found out and is held accountable. And it doesn't matter whether it's in a business environment or in the military. I mean, I've seen it in both places. I worked for a firm where I had a colleague who actually was a direct report of mine, and she stole ideas from me and went out of her way then to try and get me fired. Yeah, I found out it's hard to combat rumors when they're negative, but they're easy to start. I promoted my assistant because she finished college and applied for the position. But the rumor was, did you know Ken's promoting his assistant? I wonder what she did today. How do you combat that? But this is the practice that folks like this do. Those who operate like Babylon would stick with the lie as they want power and they want control. They also go out of their way to eliminate anybody working for them that doesn't agree with them. And this one particular individual, if the person was a believer and she found out they were a believer, she fired them. That you can't do very long without the Lord taking notice of it. So in other words, this person was piling up debts that at some point would be paid for, just like Babylon had to pay for theirs. And eventually they were. Both of our positions were eliminated at the same time. Not a big deal. That happens in business. And we were both given 2 weeks to prepare to leave, to go to our next jobs. Now, I wound up being busy all 2 weeks, meeting with everybody who worked for me, having meetings. They all wanted to go to lunch. They all wanted to say bye. They weren't happy about it, but that's what they wanted to do. She sat in her office for 2 weeks and couldn't figure out what was going on because nobody wanted to see her. Nobody wanted to talk to her. Nobody wanted to say bye. I went to say bye to her, and she wanted to know why I never retaliated. She admitted to everything, and I was given the opportunity to actually witness to her. I wish I could say she gave her life to the Lord, but I don't know if she did. I do know this. She was gone in 18 months, dead. The Lord took care of her because she had all this debt that she had accumulated, offending his own children. As believers, we're not supposed to engage like that. We're not to engage with Babylonian-like activity or actions. We don't need to be building up debts before the Lord or in the minds of the nations around us or our neighbors around us. Why? Well, go back and look at Habakkuk 2:4 again. The just shall live by faith. So back to the victims, or as Yahweh puts it, the creditors. Will your creditors not rise up suddenly, and those who collect from you awaken? Indeed, you'll become plunder for them. I've seen this happen too. The creditors suddenly decide it's time to report this action to higher authority. I have seen senior military officers who had a habit of yelling at people, walking on people, abusing their reports, and doing things that probably they shouldn't be doing, suddenly demoted, retired, and gone in a single day. And the reaction of everybody who worked for them, the creditors, applause as they walked out the door. And then extended parties at the NCO and officers' clubs that evening, celebrating that they're gone. Kind of like what you see in The Wizard of Oz when the Wicked Witch is dead. That same kind of a thing, okay? That's what we're talking about. Why do we enjoy watching that? Well, it's because we are made in the image of God. We want to see justice. So what had happened? Now, just like it says in Habakkuk, suddenly the creditors will... Well, those who were victimized rose suddenly and filed multiple complaints. At least it looked like that. They had spent time, they meticulously gathered evidence, they submitted the evidence to the appropriate authorities at that point. That documentary proof was then further investigated. The case was submitted to the senior commander, and all of them were confirmed. All the allegations are confirmed, and the individual, they found out the crimes were rather egregious. I mean, they were crimes being done as well. And the action was immediate. In fact, the one who had been commander became plunder for those who had been misused. And it was just like the wicked witch of the East being killed. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Literally, people were saying that. For Babylon, they're going to be attacked and extorted just like they had done to others. Babylon would become the victim of the victimized. It was fulfilled by the actions of the Medes and the Persians. And as you look at history, this continues to happen all throughout history. The Persian Empire victimized a group of people known as the Greeks, who invaded and took the Persian Empire. The Greeks. Sowing and reaping has never gone out of style. You study history and you see that over and over and over and over, and nobody ever learns. Solomon got it right. Verse 8, since you've looted many nations, all the rest of the peoples will loot you. Because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town, and all its inhabitants. Shades of what Nahum told the Assyrian Empire and those living in Nineveh. Even more amazing, who was it that looted Nineveh? Babylon. They're next. Now the looter will be looted. And in the world of international geopolitics, this standard still exists today. National politics, have you noticed this? Just in the last 20 years or so, national politics based simply on overwhelming power without care for the people and with no determination to establish and uphold justice never endures. What happened to the Soviet Union? And you go on and on and on. Historically, that's always been the case. So this is the end of the first woe. There's another one. Time for round 2, starting in verse 9. Woe to him who makes evil profit for his household, to put his nest on high, to be saved from the hand of catastrophe. You've planned a shameful thing for your house by bringing many peoples to an end. So you're sinning against yourself. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer it from the framework. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and founds a town with violence. Is it not indeed from the Lord of armies that peoples labor merely for fire and nations become weary for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Now, Yahweh starts off talking about injustice. The way of the world is simple. If you follow the world system, the question is, do you want to get rich? Okay, do what you can within the system. And if that's not enough, then use other means to enlarge your portfolio. Do whatever you need to do to make yourself rich. For those working in Babylon who are part of the royalty or part of the established governmental infrastructure, or a minister or some other professional, this was normal. The rule was take your pay, take your bribes, do whatever you can, and expand your portfolio because you want power, prestige, control, and money. And that's what they lived for. This was the standard of those who decided in Daniel 6, we want to destroy Daniel. So the Persians have taken over the government. Some of these guys are back in power again. Daniel is. And they decide that they want to investigate Daniel because they want him gone. He's just getting too much influence. So we come to Daniel 6, verses 3 to 5. Daniel distinguished himself above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to appoint him over the whole kingdom. So the presidents and the satraps tried to find grounds for complaint against Daniel in connection with the kingdom. They could find no grounds for complaint or any corruption because he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption could be found in him. The men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. What they discovered as a result of their internal investigation was Daniel's honest. There's no dirt. So we're going to have to make up dirt. We're going to have to lie about it. Or we can do something that we know he won't do. And we can pass a law. So they did that. The members of the Babylonian Department of Justice discovered that, and then conspired to have this new law enacted. They knew he wouldn't follow it because it would make worship illegal for a period of time. And they knew he was honest and he served the Lord and he would worship irregardless. So as soon as they passed the law, they conducted a no-knock raid on his home and caught Daniel in the act, forcing an indictment on false charges and had him arrested and condemned for simply doing what the Lord had commanded. Now, of course, it didn't end well for all of those who made the allegations. They had a little meeting a couple of days later with a group of lions, and, it wasn't a good day for them. But that was Babylon. But this is what we've just witnessed take place in most of the West during the pandemic. In some Western nations, it was decreed that teaching certain sections of the Bible, and this has happened recently too, constitutes hate speech. And now pastors are being thrown in jail in certain nations for continuing to teach what the Bible says. This has been a common practice in China for decades as the government has tried to eliminate Christianity. In Babylon, it was generally accepted practice, based on what we see in Habakkuk, that all the officials were on the take, all of them, by taking what they want to include whatever belonged to somebody else. They would call it a tax or do whatever they wanted to, if they wanted it. Members of the Babylonian hierarchy were able to make sure they had nice and secure homes. You can't have one, but they could have one. Homes intended to protect them from the rabble of the street, and it had security and safety from foreign invasion. They had no problem building up those residences with materials taken from others, but what they were doing at the same time was bringing shame on their own house. The reason being, all the neighbors knew where they were getting the building materials from. They knew who was being defrauded to have that house built. Now, they were building homes with the intent of having safety and security. They wanted to have homes that were easily defended. And if they needed a bigger house, just knock the one down next door and build it where it used to be. They had slaves to protect them and to serve them. What could possibly go wrong? The real reason, the more you take, the angrier you make others. And the more others want to punish and take back what was taken. So when the opportunity comes, such as the downfall of Babylon at the hand of the Persians, those who had been misused remembered. More people were killed by other people in the city than by the Persians. Have you noticed that we like to watch stories about those who took stuff from others and then had a fall? Doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. We just like watching crooked politicians go to jail. It's just fun to watch. They get away with it for a while, and then it's always the same story. They go down in flames. It's because we're made in the image of God. And he's pointing this out to Habakkuk. This is what's going to happen to the nation that was used to be a judge on Judah. Well, it's going to happen to all those who also insist on living for self. God's just. We reflect that, and we want to see justice as well, because we want to reflect God's justice. We want to see the wrong made right. You've made your family rich with the things you took from other people by force. You've built luxurious and secure homes, and God's going to punish you. That's the basic thing that's going to happen here. You condemned that house and took all the good stuff for yourself, and we know it. By their own actions, they've ensured that they will indeed reap what they have sown, and even the house complains and turns against them. Babylon's a type of the world. It's a type of the city of the world. And that's the next point of discussion, verses 12 to 14. The city. We're moving from individual to groups of folks in leadership positions to now we're talking about the city. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and finds a town with violence. Is it not indeed from the Lord of armies that peoples labor merely for fire and nations become weary for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. The problem, though, this was not just individual homes. This is how the whole city of Babylon grew. Injustice and murder was governmentally sanctioned in Babylon, just as it is in many nations today. In fact, in most of the West. We have progressed from individuals to families to cities, and this is a message for all, not just Babylon. There are those today who say, I would not do these actions. I would not build a city on the blood of others. Now, in Habakkuk 12, verse 12 here, the word for bloodshed is damim. The word is translated bloodshed. It is plural of the noun blood, and in the Hebrew it always means murder. That's what it always means. So when you see that, they've killed somebody who didn't deserve it. They've murdered someone. That's what it means. Now, do we have a problem with that in the world today? Yeah, we do. The problem, many cities and governments in the world today have no problem with that. Stop and think about the cities around the world and the states around the world and the nations around the world that have endorsed abortion or physician-assisted suicide and are now building themselves up on bloodshed. And you wonder how long that will go on before the Lord takes action. A city is supposed to be like Jerusalem, if Jerusalem is doing what they're supposed to be doing, a community which performs all of its functions to the glory of God. Jerusalem, when it's obedient, is a classic example of that, how a city should be built. Babylon is a type of the city of the world, and it's built on murder. It's built on bloodshed. God condemns the city built on bloodshed, on the murder of innocents, and he considers it to be founded on violence. In verse 13, God states that those who build in that manner are building it to be judged.
Thanks for joining us for today's edition of the UnSafe Bible. Pastor Ken Brown is teaching from Calvary Chapel, Martin County in Hobe Sound, Florida. Today's message is part of a series Pastor Ken is teaching on the book of Habakkuk, which is a book many of us can relate to today. The prophet Habakkuk is praying for the Lord to tear down the nation of Babylon as they continue to oppress and enslave the Jewish people. But the way God responds is interesting. He reminds us that He is the one still in control. He sees how the nations of Babylon's time, and even the nations of our modern time, have devolved into the worship of greed and cruelty. But just as kingdoms rise and fall, God will use those nations' idols against them, and the most evil empires of men will meet their own demise. It may seem like God is allowing sin to rule unopposed, but there will come a time when He will strike down the evildoer, as well as those who failed to take a stand for what is right and just. We hope that this message is reassuring to you of God's will and way. If you'd like to get connected with us here at the UnSafe Bible, you can visit us online at theunsafebible.com. Once you're there, go to the Connect tab and click on the Connect Card button so that we can get to know you. There's also an archive of past messages from Pastor Ken that you can access by clicking on the Media tab. Also, if you're near Hope Sound, we'd love to invite you to join us for an in-person service here at Calvary Chapel, Martin County. We'll be back next time for another edition of the UnSafe Bible.